welcome. You're watching Money, Money, Money. I'm Samira Abdi. And what is bound to come as a blow to potentially upwards of 5 lakh tenants in Mumbai, the government has decided to amend the Maharashtra Rent Control Act. What will this mean for the lakhs of families who are residing in these flats for, some of them say, the last 40-50 years, as well as the countless old commercial establishments? Here's our correspondent Alexander Matthew with a ground report.
Tenants in buildings like this one have been paying rent at rates frozen in time, as long back as the 1970s to be precise. But all that could change if Maharashtra's latest housing policy is implemented in its current form. The policy proposes to exclude commercial structures larger than 500 square feet and residential structures bigger than 862 square feet from the protection of the Maharashtra Rent Control Act. That means tenants used to paying rents as unbelievably low as 500 rupees a month will have to get used to paying market rates.
I think the government has generally taken a very bold step, but a necessary step to amend the act and bring out properties which are really in dilapidated conditions, and the owners of those properties are not able to look after those assets, and they're also unsafe.
The Maharashtra Rent Control Act has been protecting tenants against increase in rentals. The act is restricted to cessed buildings constructed before 1969. The proposed amendments to the act plan to cap rentals at 50% of market rates for the first 3 years. Additionally, rents will be capped at 30% of the annual income of the tenants. Senior citizens will have to pay 15% of their annual income or 50% of the market rate, whichever is lower. Experts say the new policy will lead to litigation as it doesn't answer several important questions, dealing with the pagdi system being one of them. Under this system, tenants pay 1/3 of the market value of property to the landlord upfront. This amount is non-refundable.
Today, if you want to buy a tenanted property at Linking Road, one small 500 square feet, it will cost 5 crore rupees. So you're talking about more than lakh rupees square feet rent, and on that they give 1/3 to the landlord. So you can understand that is in the form of pagdi. So after paying that much, and again you ask them to pay 50,000, 70,000 rupees a month, what kind of income they are going to get? They all will be wiped out.
The new policy also proposes to make landlords solely responsible for maintenance and upkeep of their property, taking that responsibility away from the city's housing authority, Maha, a measure which market experts feel would be hard to implement.
With tenants gearing up for a long legal battle, passing of the proposed amendments to the Rent Control Act of 1999 could well take a few years. In Mumbai, Alexander Matthew.
Well, so market rents may soon be the order of the day. In the eventuality that this amendment to the Rent Control Act comes to pass, what will be the outcome? How should you prepare for it? Joining me this week, we have Alif Fazal Boy, Senior Partner at ALMT Legal, and Ashutosh Lamai, Head of Research and Real Estate Intelligence Services at JLL India. Thanks very much, gentlemen, for being a part of this show. Mr. Fazal Boy, I want to actually start with you. I want to understand first, what exactly is the Rent Control Act? Why is there a need to change something which has been the order of the day for the last half a century, and what are your thoughts on the proposed amendments?
See, this act has been in force since the 1940s, so it's like 70, 80 years old now. And I think change is always the order of the day. The act was amended repealed, and a new act came in 1999, but the provisions were not very different in the sense the tenants still had the protection. There's a concept of standard rent. And standard rent is fixed at the rent the property was first let out, whether it was in 1973 or 1987 are the two relevant dates, or first let out after that date. So you can imagine in the old days what the rent was, 200 rupees, 70 rupees, 50 rupees, which in those days was a big amount. So that's your standard rent. And the Rent Control Act says you can only increase it by 4% every year. Now 4%, even if it's 100 rupee rent, you're talking about 4 rupees every year rent increase. So that I think there is a need for change. That is for sure. Now, how radical this change is, will it happen overnight? Of course, the whole process, the lobbies on both sides, by the time this becomes law, you're looking at a few months, if not a few years. And how will it be done? Now, in a phased manner, like they have proposed, the for 3 years you can charge 50% of market rent. After that it becomes 100%. Now, we've seen in the past the government has very good ideas. Implementation has always been the problem, whether it is bad drafting or whether it is some draconian provision slipped in, like big penalties of imprisonment or certain changes which are put in retroactively. You know, the government's implementation is not good, unfortunately. So one hopes that in this case the government will get it right. They'll think about it, do it properly. Phased manner also, in my view, I think 50% and 100% are two big slabs. Maybe it should be split, maybe 25%, 50, 75, 100 on, you know, some kind of a phased manner.
Mr. Limai, you agree? You think this is a move whose time has come?
I think so, yes. I think we need amendments, we need change to respond to how the market is functioning or how the physical stock of buildings is transforming into a highly dilapidated, dangerous buildings. So while at one end we have this problem of maintenance and repairs, which because of the Rent Control Act was actually not addressed well, because the landlords wouldn't want to put money because they are earning hardly anything out of it, and tenants, because they are tenants, they can't do much about it, especially the structural changes, etc. And in this bargain, I think we were putting those structures at risk and people's lives living in those buildings at risk. So that's one issue. I think if this amendment helps to resolve that issue, so it's a welcome step. There are families who have migrated to some other locations, responding to the changing needs of today's, but they have not vacated the old house, and they have kept their claim on because they know that they are protected, and so this may not be their first home, this may not be the dependent property for them to live on, but still they are lawful tenants. In that case, what happens is either the property or the house is underutilized, and we have a severe problem of housing shortage in the city.
Okay, so one thing I want to understand from both of you is that at any point, you know, even though it may take a few months, years, whatever, to be implemented, could it ever become grounds for eviction of the tenant?
See, it's already grounds for eviction if the tenant does not pay the rent. It's a natural consequence. So if the rents are increased and tenant doesn't pay, then it's a ground for eviction. But if he pays, he cannot be evicted. Now, you know, the problem of affording the bill, at least the news report says that the rent cannot exceed 30% of the tenant's income. So if there's a market rent is say 2 lakhs for a property and the tenant says I can't afford it, then he must go and prove that his income is say only 50,000 a month, and therefore my rent should be capped at 15,000 rupees a month. At least that's what one understands from the news reports.
But then doesn't it become counterproductive that at one point you say that, you know, you either link it to market rent or you give these caps? I mean,
yeah, but when people can afford it, then why not?
I think we need to have a careful and a proper study done. I think a blanket norm may not be as effective. It may not be justified also. So under broad kind of umbrella of a certain rule or spirit of the law, if we can create those different situations and scenarios which could be applied depending on the tenant's physical situation, I think this is what we want. But I think it's a good initiation. We need to do that sooner than later.
But could it at any point lead to this big surge in you know, rents, particularly say in a place like South Mumbai, or conversely an exodus to the suburbs and therefore a spike in rentals there?
No, I really don't expect it as a huge wave of momentum, while there will be cases for sure. But again, the definition of market rent is also a function of the building quality and status. So while the location might be great, but the building is very poorly maintained and highly dilapidated, one would the market rent for that building itself will be a lot lower than a very good building in the same locality.
The market rent, as you rightly said, would be higher for a building and lower for the next door building. So if you have a ready recno type thing, which says a particular area, this is the rent, it may not always justify.
I thought location was the only word that mattered in real estate, but clearly not. Let's take a very quick break on that note. We'll come back in a bit. Still ahead, Will this now signal the redevelopment bugle in Mumbai? Stay tuned.